Good evening, Jimmy here in Chicago. Hope everybody's enjoying their weekend. Tonight's story, we're going to talk about the end of a Chicago outfit family, the Spilotro brothers. Sadly, all six of them have passed away. If you guys have any stories, personal stories about the Spilotros, please enter into the comments. If you like my Chicago mob trial stories, hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends, and don't be afraid to donate. Now, years ago, a lot of people from Bari, Italy, settled in the old Grand and Ogden, the Grand Avenue patch. Right there on Grand and Ogden, families like the Spilotros, the Lombardos, my guy Paulie Caparelli, and many others. My family, along with my guy Gigi, we came from Cosenza, Italy. But a lot of people that still live in the neighborhood today came from Bari, Italy. And Patsy and his wife, Spilotro, opened up a mom and pop neighborhood restaurant right there on Grand Avenue. That's the building. It's still there today. Now it's a high-end hair salon. But years ago, all the outfit bosses and wise guys used to hang out at Patsy's restaurant. Men like Joe Batters. Tony Accardo grew up in this neighborhood. His house is 2 blocks away. Guys like Gus Alex, Frank Nitti, Iupa, Giancana, all the brass of the Chicago outfit used to frequent Patsy's restaurant. So there's a lot of history in that neighborhood. And all 6 of the Spilotro brothers had to work there back in the day. Now, sadly, just a few days ago, the last of the Spilotro brothers passed away. John Spilotro died 83 years old. He went out to Vegas along with some of his brothers in the early 1970s. He was considered a mob lieutenant for his brother Tony. But unlike his brother, he was more of a low-key type of guy. And John Spilotro used to spend his time here at the Gold Rush in Las Vegas, Nevada. This is kind of like the headquarters, if you will. He also did scores with the infamous Hole in the Wall gang. He also used to hang out at the Meadowlands Mall in Nevada. Years later, John, I think it was in the, mid-'80s, he got indicted in a federal racketeering case linking him to Chicago Outfit's activities in Las Vegas. However, a U.S. appeals court later ruled that the FBI search warrants were too broad, resulting in the exclusion of crucial evidence. John was acquitted, thank God, and just a few months later, after being acquitted of looking at some serious jail time, his brothers, Tony and Michael, were murdered, June 1986. But God bless John Spilotro. I'm sure now he's on the other side with all his loved ones. And then you got this photo here. It's 6 brothers, right? He had Michael Spilotro. I think he was the youngest. Pat Spilotro, They say he was the toughest Spilotro with his hands. Tony Spilotro. You had John Spilotro, who just passed away. Vic Spilotro, and I'm forgetting the other Spilotro's name, maybe Patsy. So 6 brothers. The old man must have had a lot of testosterone, right? All men. Now, older than Michael and Tony Spilotro, you had Vic Spilotro. 100% knock-around guy. He was one of the prime suspects in the disappearance of the unsolved murder of millionaire Helen Brock, the candy lady. Till this day, her body's never been found. One of the very first trials I went to was a bench trial of con man Richard Bailey. He was one of the men responsible for the disappearance of Helen Brock, along with that lowlife Chris Hansen. But some people believe that Victor was involved in the candy lady's disappearance. If you guys want to check out the story, when I went to that trial, the Helen Brock trial, check it out in some of my prior YouTube videos. But Victor grew up on the West Town, kind of a knock-around guy, burglar, thief. He went out to Vegas in the 70s. He eventually got pinched in 1980. He was convicted of illegal gambling and tax fraud, along with operating a BM operation, disguised as a racetrack messenger service. These guys have all kinds of scams. Vic Spilotro was sentenced to 18 months in prison. And when Vic got out, being the stand-up guy that he is, he immediately went to work for this guy, boss of the Chicago Heights crew, El Taco. I have a friend that knew El Taco pretty well. He told me how handsome and what a ladies' man El Taco was. But according to the government, El Taco was one of the men that took part in the brutal beatdown of Tony and Michael Spilotro. He was also accused of being part of the botched burial. El Taco shelved it, lammed it out to Greece, and they eventually got indicted. His own wife testified against him. But Vic Spilotro reported to El Taco, boss of the Chicago Heights crew. Now, a year after the Spilotro brothers were brutally stomped in 1986, I think it was June of 1986, a year later, Vic Spilotro became a made member of the Chicago outfit. And some of the people that were close to the Spilotros said that Vic Spilotro, a guy in that life, wasn't just a burglar or thief, but he had to put in some work. He had a feeling that Jimmy Marcello had something to do with his brother's murders. But yet, there was really not a whole lot he could do about it, right? Now, another Spilotro brother that I never even heard about until the family secret trial is, I think, the oldest, is Dr. Patrick Spilotro. This guy's a dentist, right? I'll never forget seeing him towards the end of the family secret trial in 2007. The government called him as a witness. He testified that he would visit a lot of the mob guys and associates that were locked up in federal prison. He would visit them in prison and ask them, who killed my brothers, Tony and Michael, and why? He was obsessed with his brother's murders, and he wanted revenge. He was not involved in that life. He was the only Spilotro brother that went legit, becoming a very prominent dentist. All the wise guys, a lot of the professional athletes, VIPs, and socialites in Chicago used to go to Dr. Pat. And I remember in court, I was surprised how big of a man he was and also how much he resembled his brother Tony Spilotro. But all the guys that he visited in prison pretty much ghosted him. Some of them didn't know. Some of them weren't saying anything. But what a lot of people didn't know is he was working with the government for years, providing them tidbits of information on past current activities, who's who, kind of gave him a breakdown of a chart, if you will, and was spilling tea on every wise guy and associate that he knew. So yes, he was an informant and he was a rat. He wanted vengeance for his brother's murders. He's also the man that treated Joe Lombardo's tooth when Joey was on the lam. He asked Joey, who killed my brothers and why? Joey told him, Doc, if I wasn't in prison, it would have never have happened. Second time he treated Joey's tooth when he had a relapse, Joey told him, Doc, if you're given an order, you got to follow that order. If you don't follow that order, you go too. Dr. Peck Spilotro didn't like that response. He tipped off the FBI, and they arrested Dominic Calarco and Joe Lombardo, two senior citizens, men in their late 70s. But it was Dr. Pat Spilotro that ratted out Joe Lombardo. The Spilotros and Lombardos were very, very close, almost like family. Again, they all came from Bari, Italy. And what upset me is, even though Joey believes he could have saved the Spilotros, I don't think God himself could have saved the Spilotros. That's how upset the bosses were with, especially Tony. But Joey had nothing to do with the murders of the Spilotro brothers. And for Dr. Pat Spilotro to rat him out like that, that shows you the kind of man he was. But shortly after that, he passed away. God bless Pat, the Dr. Spilotro, the dentist. Now you got, there you go, Joey. Sorry, I made a mistake. So Dr. Pat Spilotro, the dentist, ratted out Joe Lombardo. I love this booking photo of Joey. I'll never forget seeing him testify in court. He actually took the stand in his own defense. He came across likable, charming, and he didn't look like a big, tough outfit guy. He was a small, frail man, had a lot of personality. I mean, they don't call him the clown for nothing. Cracking jokes, one-liners throughout court for 3 months. He even had the judge laughing at one time. But sadly, he was convicted. The government was able to prove that Joe Lombardo took part in a hit team that killed Danny Seifert. But God bless Joe Lombardo. Now you got these two, right? We all know about Michael, the youngest Spilotro, and Tony Spilotro. Michael joined his brother, left his home in Oak Park, relocated to Nevada, and joined his brother. It was kind of like somewhat of a wannabe. Wanted to get into the movies, wanted to get into Hollywood. On the side, some say he was selling a little blow out of one of his restaurants. But he really wasn't involved in the heavy work like Tony or some of the guys in the Hole in the Wall gang or Vic Spilotro. Tony Spilotro, as we all know, was sent out to Vegas to control the skim. There's a lot of reasons they had to get rid of Tony Spilotro. Number one was the skim was being skimmed. Number two, there was a lot of people getting killed out there. There was a lot of heat from the local police and FBI agents. He was involved in drugs and a motorcycle gang. He was creating a big name for himself, putting the Chicago outfit in the spotlight on the map, really pissing off the Chicago outfit bosses that warned him to keep his head down. He was fucking the Jew's wife, which was pretty much the last straw. Not quite sure why they killed Michael. Maybe it was because he was selling blow out of one of his restaurants in Chicago. Maybe they felt Michael Spilotro would retaliate if they just killed Tony. Or more likely, they used Michael as a pawn to set up the meeting. Michael Spilotro trusted Jimmy Marcello. Government alleges that it was Jimmy Marcello that set up the Spilotro brothers. I talked about this many times. Unlike the movie Casino, what really happened was, according to the government's case, their investigation, and that informant, that rat, Nick Calabrese, when he flipped, he testified in great detail that Jimmy Marcello picked up John Feccarata, Jimmy LaPetria, and Nick Calabrese at a Venture parking lot. He picked them up in a real fancy van and dropped them off at the house in Bensonville. Nicky Calabrese testified he got there a little bit early. He made small talk with some of the men there. Sam Carlisi was the first man to greet him. Carlisi was making a couple wisecracks about Nick's tan, him spending some time out in Vegas, making Nick feel a little uneasy. Meanwhile, John Feccarata beelined it to the bathroom. Nick noticed Feccarata was in there for a long time. When Feccarata came out, Nick Calabrese testified he was white as a ghost. Feccarata thought the hit was for him. Now, some people don't believe some of the heavyweights, some of the bosses, like DeFranzo, Ferriola, Carlisi, Infelice were all there. They think Nick Calabrese just put him there. What do you guys think? I think the bosses were there for one. They wanted to personally be there to get their licks in. And also, there's a few other murders where a couple of the outfit bosses were present. So this is not uncommon for the Chicago outfit. After they made small talk, Nick Calabrese testified he heard, "They're here." Nick said now he got tense. He's starting to get tense. He knows what's about to happen. All the men in the basement had gloves on. Michael Spilotro, the youngest of the Spilotro, he was the first one. He walked down the stairs. Nick greeted him with a handshake and a smile because he knew Michael. Nick immediately dove for his ankles, like tackling him, while Louis Ebele, Louis the Mooch, strangled Michael with a rope from behind. Nick said Michael went quietly and easily. He didn't even put up a fight. A small .22 caliber gun fell out of Michael's pants. John DeFranzo picked it up, unloaded it, and then wiped a small smudge of blood off the wall. This is according to Nick Calabrese. When he named the men there, he said he thought out of the corner of the eye, he thought he saw Rocky and Felice. Now, keep in mind, he's testifying in 2007. This happened in 1986. So most of his details were on point, but there was a couple little gray areas there because the feds had Rocky and Felice under surveillance at a different location. So right there's reasonable doubt. Rocky could not have been at both places. But what do I think? No, I wasn't there, but I think somehow Rocky gave the feds the slip and was present to personally be there to beat and stomp Michael and Tony Spilotro. That's just my opinion. When they had the meeting, when they were planning the Spilotro hit, Rocky was so pissed off, he said, "Let's hit him." Afterwards, Michael realizes the gig's up. He has to say a prayer. He was brutally stomped to death. When they showed the autopsy photo in the courtroom, you could hear Tony Spilotro, from the chest to his head, his entire torso was purple, black, and blue. You could not even recognize him. I posted some of those graphic photos in earlier videos. You could also see him in that book, Pay, Quit, or Die. But that was a brutal way for the Spilotro brothers to die. They could easily shot them in the back of the head or blew them up in their car. But they brutally beat and stomped both brothers. We all know another crew came in and buried them in Northwest Indiana. These bodies were never supposed to be found. It was a botched burial. When they were found, it made national attention. The Chicago outfit bosses were fucking livid. But sadly, that was the end of Tony and Michael Spilotro. And many years later, 2005, 2007, because of Nick Calabrese's cooperation, they were convicted. So the family did get justice, right? Now, I never knew any of the Spilotros. I never met them. I did see Dr. Pat Spilotro testify one day at the Dirksen Federal Building. But when I lived in a little apartment by this auto body shop on Grand and Noble, right there in the neighborhood, I used to get hundreds of parking tickets from Vic Spilotro. And I saved a couple of them. And I'm going to try to find one and post it. But it was just kind of funny because me personally, I get a lot of parking tickets as well. This is a big scam of the city of Chicago, not just parking tickets, but camera light tickets. But imagine getting weekly mail with the last name Spilotro on there for a parking ticket. So we'll just do a little recap here. I got some new content I'm working on. Like I said, I'm trying to set up some interviews with maybe Kurt Calabrese to tell his powerful story and what his Uncle Nick was like. Stories we've never heard before. What the other side of Nick Calabrese was like. Not the outfit killer, coward, informant that he was. I want to get Ronnie Jarrett Jr. on here to talk about what he thinks of some of the Chicago outfit guys, knowing that they killed his father. He didn't rat. He didn't take any vengeance. He just took it like a man. Imagine seeing your father shot and killed a block from your house. I also want to get Mark Polchman Jr. on the show to talk about the Mike Sarno, Mark Polchman trial that I went to. That was the Chicago Outfits connection to the Chicago Outlaw Motorcycle Gang. There was a bombing involved, and all the defendants were found guilty. I want to get Mark Jr. to talk about what it's like having a Chicago Outfit associate, his father, being locked away for decades, where he's got to take care of his mom and his siblings. And these are powerful stories. I got one show coming up with Mary Frangella. She was a female that grew up in the Grand Avenue neighborhood. She's going to tell some stories about her being Joey Lombardo's lookout, her having an affair with Frankie Collada. So stay tuned. I also got a Rat of the Month. My July Rat of the Month's coming up. So let's give a special shout out again. All 6 of the Spilotro brothers. Most recently, John passed away. Low-key guy, lieutenant. Not think he was a made guy, but definitely an associate. Did a lot of scores with the Hole in the Wall gang. Moved out to Vegas. And recently passed away, 83. Never spent time in prison. Then you had a tougher guy, one of the older Spilotro brothers, Vic Spilotro. Prime suspect, one of the suspects in the disappearance of the candy lady Helen Brock. This guy did a little time in prison. As soon as he gets out of prison, he goes to work for Chicago Heights crew boss Al Taco. A year later, after the Spilotro brothers get killed, Vic becomes a made man. Some people think he always felt Jimmy Marcello was involved. 1986, both Spilotro brothers were lured to a house in Bensonville where they were brutally stomped to death, beaten, stomped. Then you got Dr. Pat Spilotro, obsessed with his brother's murders. Who killed my brothers and why? He was actually working for the government the entire time. So he eventually got justice. I didn't really care for the man. The way he acted in the courtroom, you could tell he had an axe to grind. He came across arrogant and a little cocky. And then again, if you're ever in the neighborhood, there's a lot of history here in the Grand and Ogden neighborhood. You got Patsy's Restaurant. That building is owned by the Stramaglia family, relative of Jack Cerrone, and they own most of the buildings up and down Grand Avenue. Across the street was a place, La Rox. Then you got the Kozo compound. Mikey Switek told me On any given night, you had anywhere from 50 to 75 guys all hanging out outside. Just down the street, you had the old Como Inn. So a lot of great restaurants, bakeries. This is an old Italian neighborhood, the Grand and Ogden neighborhood. But check it out. You could still drive by the old Patsy's restaurant. But God bless James Marcello. If it wasn't for Nick Calabrese testimony, this man would be home today. And I'm hoping that the government will give him compassionate release. El Taco ended up dying in prison because his own wife testified against him. You either end up dead or you end up in jail. You guys like my Chicago mob trial stories? Hit the like button, subscribe, share with your friends. Now, for you haters out there, get off the blow, turn off your porn sites, and take the old lady to Olive Garden, will you? Treat her to a nice steak dinner at Outback. Ciao.